Borthakur IAS Academy. Prostuti aru adhyayoner nirbhorjogyo thikona. Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 22nd May 2021. Let us start with the first article today. Supreme Court, personal guarantors liable for corporate debt. Now the court has cleared the insolvency proceedings under the Insolvency Bankrupt Code norms. To a little bit of history to this, in the November of 2019, the Government of India brought about a notification which allowed creditors, which are usually financial institutions and banks, to move against personal guarantors under the IBC code. Immediately in the aftermath of this notification, various individuals and companies moved against or contesting this notification brought by the Government of India in various high courts. Later on, the Supreme Court consolidated all the cases under its umbrella, took over the cases from high courts and transferred it to the Supreme Court, and constituted a bench to conduct deliberations in this matter. Now, under Justice Bhatt, the court has announced that whatever the notification that was brought by the Government of India, wherein it allowed creditors to move against personal guarantors under the code, was legal and valid. It is a shot in the arm for government and the banking institutions, which are under tremendous pressure to recover bad loans from bad faith actors. Now the court said that whatever the notification was brought was an intrinsic connection. There is an intrinsic connection between personal guarantors and their corporate debtors. One thing you have to remember, whenever an institution is taking out a loan in huge sum, they have to present some sort of guarantee to the against the loan that they are taking out from the financial institution. In most of the cases, the loans are not given out in the name of the people or against people, but in the name of or against an institution. So what these people who own the company, they'll give their own assets as surety against the loan. But whenever they fail to repay the loan amount, earlier the banks could not move against these individuals who gave surety to the loan at the behest of the company. The court said that the person who is giving surety to the company for the loan that they are taking out are generally the people who own the company themselves. So the court observed that there was an intrinsic connection between personal guarantors and their corporate debtors. Justice Bhatt, who authored the 82-page verdict, which is very detailed, said that this intimate connection that made the government recognize personal guarantors as separate species under the Indian Bankruptcy and Insolvency Code. Now, he also referred that the November 2019 notification had not strayed from the original intent of the IBC, because one of the petitioners clearly stated that the notification is against the IBC code and hence it is null and void. But on the contrary, the justice observed that it is in line with IBC and actually it carries out the intent and has not strayed away from the goal of the IBC. And he also got into the details, stating that Section 62 of the code had required the bankruptcy proceedings for corporate debtors and their personal guarantees to be held before a common forum, that is the NCLT. So, as I said earlier, now this judgment from Justice Bhatt, that is from the Supreme Court, gives a shot in the arm for government vis-a-vis financial institutions and banks, which can now proceed and initiate proceedings against defaulters of large loans. Otherwise, they would have had to written off that loans as bad loans and had to take the negative impact of bad loans, which again will put a lot of strain and burden on our own banking and financial sector. So this is a good omen in the direction of repairing our financial sector and banks from whatever the damage such bad faith actors as these companies who took huge loans. And maybe we can clearly see that since the beginning of their loan process, meaning the moment they approach, it can be said that few of these debtors had no intention of repaying also, by the way these people are acting. At the end of the day, the notification that the government of India brought in November of 2019 is legal and valid. There is a connection between the personal guarantors and the corporate debtors. 3. The notification did not stray away from the IBC, but actually it is well within its law and it is actually performing what it was brought in to do so. Coming to the next article, Israel-Hamas reached truce after 11 days of fighting. So, since riots broke at Jerusalem and subsequent firing of rockets by Hamas from Gaza into Israel, for the 11 days, both sides, both Israel and Hamas, carried out critical actions on their part. I mean to say that Hamas was firing rockets, mortars, drones and whatnot at civilian population aimed in Israel. As a retaliatory measure to this warlike action, Israel has been carrying out surgical strikes on Hamas positions. They have been taking out houses of Hamas leadership, they have been taking out tunnels, they have been taking out critical infrastructure that Hamas was using to fire rockets and ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, into Israel. After multiple attempts from various countries, there was an active effort to get a ceasefire in place between Hamas and Israel. After the 4th or 5th day, Hamas reached out to world leaders and asked for a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister, the Israeli Defense Minister, both came out in a press statement and denied that whatever the Hamas is asking for in a ceasefire, there isn't going to be any ceasefire. The actions will be long, and a lot of action from the side of Israel as a response to Hamas action will continue in the future days, is what the Prime Minister said 6 or 7 days ago. Meaning, he shot down any hope for having a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, because they felt that if they stop now, Hamas is going to carry out its attacks in the near future. They wanted to send a message to Hamas that Israel is not going to take this one out silently. So both sides were very heavy on rhetoric, saying that who are they to reject, who are they to give ceasefire to us? We are not going to take the ceasefire, was the statement from Hamas subsequently. But after 11 days, after multiple failed attempts by international community to get a ceasefire in place between Hamas and Israel, both in UN Security Council and other various international forums, finally, through Egypt, Egypt was successful in getting a ceasefire done between Israel and Hamas. This ceasefire has come at a time when a lot of loss of life has taken place on both sides, particularly in the case of the Palestine side, which the Hamas control, particularly the Gaza Strip. Conservative international estimates put anywhere between 150 to 200 civilians killed in the surgical airstrikes taken by the Israeli side. While coming to the Israeli side, the Israeli military and the Israeli government said that close to 12 civilians and a soldier were killed, and among those civilians killed, we have one Indian among the dead. So, the loss of life, though it is skewed, the violence is same on both sides. The innocent people are getting killed by actions of in the case of Israel, it's a state actor. In the case of Hamas, it's a non-state actor. At the end of the day, it is the civilians who are getting bombarded with bombs. So nobody is safe on the both sides. Now, there is a ceasefire in place, meaning that neither of the sides are going to stop whatever the actions that were carrying out. What are those actions? In the case of Hamas, that is controlling the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, they are going to stop firing rocket salvos into Israel. So, by the end of the 10th or 11th day, Hamas, which controls the Palestinian territory of Gaza, has fired almost 3,000 rockets into Israel, targeting Israel civilian clusters, out of which both Israelis and certain NGOs based out of Gaza estimate that 600 fell in Palestinian territory itself, hurting Palestinian citizens. On the contrary, Israel has carried out more than 300 airstrikes in an operation called Operation Guardian Walls, where they conducted airstrikes against Hamas positions and conducted air raids and shelling. Now these are the actions that they are going to stop from 2 a.m. in the morning. The Egypt said it would send 2 delegations to monitor it, to see that the ceasefire holds in place. Nobody is going to negate that, and it is also trying to monitor both the warring parties, as both are ready to retaliate any violations that might take place from one side the other. If Hamas says no to the ceasefire and starts violating the ceasefire agreement, I'm pretty sure that Israel is going to respond far more seriously and far more violently. As far as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the operation had hit the ability of Hamas, the Islamist group, as he puts it, which runs Gaza, to launch missiles at Israel. Now, that is the situation currently in place in Israel right now. There is a ceasefire. Egypt has been able to get a ceasefire going between both the countries, both the warring regions. Egypt is sending a monitoring delegation to monitor both sides so that nobody violates the ceasefire. On the side of Palestinians, due to the actions of Hamas, more than 200 people lost their lives. On Israeli side, again due to the actions of Hamas, which launched rockets indiscriminately into civilian clusters, close to 12 people lost their life, including an Indian woman. At the end of the day, as I said earlier, it's the civilians who suffer irrespective of who takes the action at the behest of them. So moving to the next article, data protection laws. We have been following what is happening with WhatsApp privacy policy in India. Yesterday, the government of India sent a clear-cut notice to WhatsApp stating that if you don't stop or prevent your updated privacy policy from being implemented in India, you will be taken to task through the courts. To again revise what has been going on, WhatsApp initially proposed a February 8 deadline for the new privacy policy that they were going to institute in India. As a result of it, majority of the people had migrated from WhatsApp to other social messaging apps such as Signal, which focuses primarily on privacy and data security. From the initial backlash, WhatsApp decided to push the update to May 15th. In the meantime, there were deliberations going in the Delhi High Court from government, various individuals and WhatsApp company. Now, the government, WhatsApp has said that they are not going to roll out the update or the policy update on May 15th, and they are going to give some more time to ensure that all the users, all the WhatsApp messaging service users in India be made aware of whatever the updates that they are going to bring in their privacy terms. Now the problem comes to or boils down to two things. One, it's a private company. WhatsApp is a private company operating in India. It operates under international US laws, but it is obligated to follow Indian laws also. Particularly in the case of data protection laws, India doesn't have any said specific data protection laws that protects Indian citizens. Whatever the ID laws that we have are old, out of date, and are of little significance in terms of protecting public data. That is one side of the argument. The second side of the argument is WhatsApp itself came out and said that they don't care if people want to move out of the app if they don't want to follow the new updated privacy policy. If that is the stance of the messaging service or the company, what right does the government of India has to dictate terms to that private company? So this is where the stalemate is happening right now. India doesn't have specific data protection laws like what European countries have. European countries have General Data Protection Regulation or GDPR as we know them, and they are very strict about implementing the GDPR regulations on social media companies and digital companies. They even have imposed fines on Google, Facebook in tunes of millions of euros for violating the GDPR rules and regulations. India doesn't have similar data protection laws in place. 2. WhatsApp itself is not saying that if people want to delete the app and not use it, we are not bothered about it. Whoever wants to use the app, they have to accept the terms that we are going to bring in. 3. You cannot, as I said earlier, compare what WhatsApp is doing in Europe with what it is doing to Indian customers, because as I said, there is a dichotomy of laws and lack of clear transparent laws in India. Now, when will India bring about these laws like the GDPR regulations in Europe? The answer is nobody knows. At this point of time, all we know is that the government has put in a committee to suggest or do complete research into this GDPR thing and stipulate some form of a policy response to our lack of privacy laws in India. Now, when the case is entirely being fought out of court, one of the interesting things that WhatsApp has brought as an argument into the affidavit was that they said that the government is targeting WhatsApp individually and singled it out and showed that the policy that it intends to bring into India is not different from those of private apps such as Google, BigBasket, Co, and other public apps including 𝐅𝐨𝐫 𝐁𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐷 IRCTC and other governments have. So this is the stalemate that is going in India for the few months. First we have Twitter. We will discuss Twitter in the later article also, because the government of India is at loggerheads with Twitter again. Whatever the government tries to do in terms of having some sort of control or some sort of say in what these social media companies do, all they can do at this point of time is, to be pretty honest, write letters. That's it. The second thing is they can take them to the court, and I'm pretty sure that whatever the decisions that are going to come out, meaning the judgments that are going to come out of the court, are going to be in the favor of companies, because we don't have laws. Even the court operates under law. The government has to prove that whatever these people are doing is against the law. When there is no law in existence, how the government is going to prove its case that these people are acting against law? So obviously the court is going to side with the social media companies. That is what civil society has been saying. That is what data protection activists have been saying. That is what experts have been saying, including in and out of the government. So, first, set your house in order is what majority of the experts are saying. At least get some inspiration from GDPR or some other privacy laws that US and other countries have. Even Singapore has data protection laws and data security laws. So we have to consider what our priority right now is and try to come out with a protection law that protects the interests of Indian civilians. Yesterday, Air India announced that there has been a massive data breach where hackers were able to access, download and download data from 2001 to till now. They were able to get names, transfer, individual details, credit card, debit card, financial details, everything was compromised in this data breach. We don't know the full extent of the breach until an investigation is done. We don't know how much data has been compromised. We don't know how the hackers are going to use this data. I'm pretty sure this is going to be sold on black market or on dark web to highest bidders. We don't know the full extent of the impact that it is going to have on the lives of people whose data is compromised. And we don't have a proper law to respond to these types of digital crises in India. So that is the problem here. Coming to the next article, Center wants manipulated media tag of toolkit tweets. So, you are currently aware that there is a crisis brewing in political structures of our country where one party is accusing the other party of over a leaked toolkit allegedly masterminded and created by the other party. As a result of this, the spokesperson of BJP happens to be Sambit Patra. He posted a tweet criticizing and publishing certain data relating to the toolkit on Twitter. We are not going into what the toolkit says because at this point of time it is a legal thing. Nobody knows whether it is real or fake. So as the matter is in the court and until the veracity of the document is maintained, we don't want to get into that because we are not into speculation. We are into learning what is legal and what is illegal. As this matter is in still deliberations, we don't know whether, as I said, the toolkit is true or not. Until that point, I'm not going to discuss that toolkit. Once we know whether the toolkit is real or not, then in the later classes, maybe we'll discuss it. What the items, content of it is and what its message was, because we don't want to speculate. We are not into speculation. We are into facts. So he posted a tweet in response to whatever the toolkit that was floating around, and Twitter in its infinite wisdom thought it would be a good idea to put a tag suggesting manipulated media. So Twitter has been undermining the government of India for the last few years, to be clear, pretty clear with you. One, Twitter has this policy in every part of the world where they let their political leanings come into Twitter policies. That is, there is no love lost there. This is a fact, and they have been criticized for it in courts all around the world. In the case of US, they were accused and they were found to be manipulating elections that were taking place in United States. If not in the national level, their policies were particularly skewed towards the Democratic Party, and they ensured that certain censorship did take place on the Republican and conservative sides. The same policy has been implemented in United Kingdom, Germany, France. They tried this in France. Emmanuel Macron was very angry and he said that if Twitter does this again, we are going to ban the servers in France. They did the same thing in Russia. Russia gave 1 week notice to Twitter. and said that if you don't change your policies in regards to, we don't care about what you do in other parts of the world. When it comes to Russia, if you don't change your policies, we are going to take you off the servers. And they did briefly so to threaten social media services. India is writing letters because we don't have laws. We don't have data manipulation laws, data protection laws. We don't have clear legal definitions of what a manipulated media is. So Twitter can get away from whatever the thing that they are doing with our political institutions and freedom of speech. Rightly, like how our ministers always do, the Minister of Electronics and IT has written a strong communication to the global team of Twitter, which, like always, it had no comment to make. Now, they are saying that they are going to take legal actions on Twitter also. First, Twitter has been accused and found to be manipulating their services and policies against one particular ideology all around the world. Does these principles or this stand taken up by Twitter violate the idea of freedom of speech in India? Yes, because they are actively censoring certain people's opinion and certain people's freedom of thought. From that point of view, whether you support one party or the other party, or you don't support any party, you are neutral, it doesn't matter. Everybody has the right to express their own thoughts, and they have the freedom of expression in India. When a social media company undermines these rights given by the Constitution of India, and this is being done by a private company that doesn't operate from India and has its servers outside of India, this is a serious implication in terms of our legal safeguards. From that point of view, you have to be very clear that it is not the right of Twitter to take away somebody's right of expression or freedom of speech. From that point of view, we have to be very clear. Whether you agree with the ideology or not, it's irrelevant. You have to understand that a private company that is not operating out of India but is conformed to or controlled to operate under Indian laws is undermining Indian laws given to every citizen by the Constitution of India. So again, we have to see how this entire episode plays out. Until that time, we have to adhere to what are the facts of the situation, and we have to stick to ourselves only the facts. Coming to the next article, China offers 3 billion assistance jabs for developing countries. At this point of time, the Beijing, that is the Chinese government, has offered vaccine to 80 other countries. In addition to that, China has also pledged $3 billion in aid for developing countries to assist their COVID-19 response, and suggested that they are going to set up a global forum on vaccines to ensure equitable distribution. One, they have been pretty active with using their vaccines in diplomacy. Two, as an addition to that, they are going to sharpen their diplomatic outreach by adding the financial component into their COVID response. This is a two-front war. The third concept here is the suggested setting up of a global forum on vaccines to ensure equitable distribution. Remember, the Western countries and the United Nations got together and set up had already had a system in place for the equitable distribution of vaccines. That is the COVAX initiative, where the UN and other developed countries came together and said that COVAX, we are going to donate vaccines to COVAX, which is a forum, international forum, that is going to ensure equitable distribution of vaccines around the underdeveloped countries. It is an interesting point to note that China is suggesting an other forum and an alternative forum to whatever the Western countries and UN had set in place. China is propping up their own COVAX-like initiative to get their message across. This was proposed by President Xi Jinping as he was addressing the Global Health Summit G20 and the European Commission. China had a significant blow in terms of European Commission, because the European Commission has unequivocally voted that they are not going to take up the Chinese investment plan ahead until and unless certain guarantees were made by the Chinese government. So till this point of time, China has claimed that they have supplied around 300 million doses of vaccines to underdeveloped countries around the world. They have been actively in negotiations with countries surrounding India in terms of Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan and South Asian countries for setting up their own Chinese vaccine manufacturing factories. Now, the component of adding 3 billion assistance to the COVID fight in terms of financial aid and giving up more doses of Sinopharm and other Chinese vaccines to these underdeveloped countries, and the proposed setting up of an forum against COVAX is an interesting turn of events. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। Borthakur IAS Academy।